first of all, you told me not too long ago that two women in your life, two important women in your life, gave you an early profound appreciation for the subject of education. Why don't we start on that tack?
Good, Jack. Those two women were my mother and my wife, in that order. Of course, my mother having an impact on me before I met and married the girl of my dreams. My mother was not well educated. No one in my family had a high school diploma. Some barely went to high school. Most were eighth grade grammar school level people. But my mother, for whatever her reasons were, recognized the importance of education. And she pushed me very hard to understand and appreciate what it meant in my life. And so from word one, she was very intolerant of bad grades, intolerant of a young teenager fooling around and not paying attention to schoolwork. And so she was instrumental in my not only staying in high school, but also doing well. And then, of course, when I graduated from high school, she was most influential in getting me to go into college. And as a matter of fact, were it not for that, I wouldn't have met my wife, because I met my wife at the University of Illinois at the Chicago Undergraduate Division. And, of course, she recognized the importance of education as well and carried on really for my mother. So all through, particularly our early married life, Joan was very instrumental in my continuing my education. In fact, years after I received my undergraduate degree, and recognizing that at that time advanced education was really a door to success. And after having a couple of children, she encouraged me to go back and get my master's degree, which represented a major sacrifice for her, because I continued, of course, my full-time employment, but to get that master's degree was a burden on our family that was incomparable. So Jean, my mother, and Joan, my wife, were not only instrumental, but were the catalyst for whatever I've accomplished, because without that, I probably would still be working in the steel mills, because that's where I started, in the steel mills. And there aren't very many jobs left there, but I probably would have had that kind of job in my life were it not for my education.
How did that going for that master's degree open your eyes to, well, actually, the baccalaureate degree, then the master's degree. How did that open your eyes to a broader world ahead of you?
Yeah, interesting. And I've been blessed, Jack. I've been very blessed to have things happen in my life at the right time. My undergraduate degree was from DePaul University, and I owe DePaul a great debt. My master's degree was from the University of Chicago, and the quality of the graduate education there is incredible. And I rubbed elbows with professors who have renowned worldwide reputations and are really very good at what they do. And so the experience that I had at the University of Chicago opened my eyes in a number of ways. First of all, to astoundingly capable professorial individuals. And the system there was student cohorts. And so I was in a group of 6 or 8 other students, and we studied together. And they developed the cohorts based upon particular expertise. So we'd have an accountant, a lawyer, an engineer, a marketing person. And so we shared our life experiences in this common effort to get through the classes. And it was an incredible experience for me because I had firsthand at each of my elbows people who knew what they were talking about in these various disciplines. So not only was I benefited, and I am an accountant and my expertise was in that area, but I broadened my understanding of not only the business world, but even beyond the business world, by understanding more about society, by understanding more about people, individuals. And so it was a unique experience.
Where did you get the underpinnings for the value of giving back to community, the importance of community service? Where did that come from?
Jack, I wish I could pinpoint it for you. I can't. I know when it happened in my life. I was in my mid-20s. I'd been through service. I had graduated from DePaul. I'd been out of that environment for a year or two or three, and I was just overcome with the need to give something back. And maybe it happened one night, maybe when I was praying, I don't know, but it happened. And from that point forward, I began to be involved in community activities.
With respect to, let's start with Paul, for example. You've had a long and very enthusiastic relationship with that university, starting from your undergraduate days to the board of trustees, the chairmanship of the board. What's the importance of that university in your life, and how you've been able to work with it and work for it on its behalf? What it's done for you?
Yeah. Well, I could not have enjoyed my life nearly as much had it not been for Vincentians. The fathers there, the priests there, create an environment of learning and of social awareness that is incredible. And if I had to trace my feeling for giving back to any particular thing, it would have been to the Vincentian attitude. And St. Vincent, of course, was a person who dedicated his life to the needy and the poor people in France. And so the experience that I had at DePaul was very fulfilling and heartwarming in the sense that it was not only an education, but it was, again, an explosion for me of understanding, of a feeling, of a knowledge that I wasn't just a person in a vacuum, but I was a person in a society with other people who had needs as well as mine. And so I think in terms of whatever humanitarian bent I have today, that the Vincentians created much of that during those years that I was at DePaul. And then, of course, shortly after, maybe 5 or 6 or 7 years after I graduated, I became involved. And from that time forward until this very day, I do a lot of things on behalf and with DePaul University.
During your time on the board and your involvement with DePaul, it's become the second largest Catholic university, or is it the largest Catholic?
Well, Jack, I don't want to correct you, but it is the largest. It's the largest Catholic.
The second largest comes from another. If I read my own notes here, I do.
Yeah. Okay.
But it's certainly grown exponentially under the time that you were involved with it.
Yeah.
What were some of the things that some of the projects you engaged in, and the directions you tried to set there with your involvement?
Well, obviously, in an institution of this size, one person is not responsible for major changes. It's really teamwork. We had a marvelous board. One of the things that I think I'm proudest of is that during my chairmanship, I did recognize the need to strengthen the board. And as I looked at competitors, other universities in and around Chicago, I saw that our Board of Trustees wasn't quite as strong and as influential in the community as others. And so we set upon a program, a project of enhancing the quality of our board in terms of its influence in the Chicago area, and I think quite successfully. We encouraged chief executive officers from many of the large corporations, many of the personal service firms, the accounting firms, the law firms, to join in the DePaul effort, and we succeeded. We have then, 15 years ago and through today, a very, very strong board of directors that is producing the kind of mission development and resource development and direction that I think a fine university is deserving of. And if there's anything that propelled DePaul in terms of its growth and its success in terms of serving the community in which we direct ourselves to, it is the quality of the board. I think also, just in terms of brick and mortar, during my tenure as chairman, we expanded our square foot under roof dramatically. We acquired what was known then as the Goldblatt's building. It's at DePaul Center now. It was the largest project undertaken by DePaul through that time. I think the budget was somewhere in the range of $75 million. We jointed with the city of Chicago. We built out that facility and rented a piece of it to the city in exchange for some unique financing. And so we're able to do it kind of on a shoestring. DePaul is clearly blue collar in terms of our endowment. We are not an overwhelmingly wealthy institution. And so we have to be very careful with respect to how we put resources into the community. But in this period of time, I'd say in the last 10 years, we probably have added $250 million to facilities in the Chicago area. So we have done quite well.
Talk about the social commitment at DePaul during your tenure and how that was embodied in different programs that reached out into the community, out into the state, the nation.
Well, it was really not as difficult as it might be in some other institution, because we start at DePaul with a Vincentian heritage, and St. Vincent de Paul served the poor, and so one of the legs of our mission statement is a recognition that we must outreach into the community, and so it's embodied in our mission, and so. It isn't very difficult, I think, to create the programs once you can find the resources that will direct you that way, because it's literally part of your mission. And so we have formulated any number of exciting programs. The Chaddock Center is exactly what we're talking about. It's an outreach of programs into the community. We have a legal center under the direction of Sharif Bassioni, who is world recognized. We do outreach in terms of fairness throughout the world. We are very involved now in Iraq in terms of training judges, in terms of assisting the legal network, the legal system in Iraq. DePaul has undertaken that through Sharif's Center for Legal Justice. So we have any number of programs that are directed to outreach, basically to cure inequities, basically to allow opportunity to come into those communities that are needy. In the summertime, I know because I have a direct kind of involvement in funding, we have what we call a program called Books and Hoops. And what it does is take children out of the underprivileged areas, basically the south and west sides in Chicago, and we bring them into DePaul, into the DePaul Lincoln Park community, where they study, i.e. books, but they also play basketball and other sports. And so we mix those two together because obviously some, particularly boys at that age, would prefer to play sports than to study. So we give them a taste of both, and the program has been eminently successful. And so it's those kinds of things that we're able to accomplish. And it's really quite an interesting place to be because, again, it's embedded in our mission. And every one of our trustees, every one of our faculty members, everyone involved in the administration has the same direction. We believe that is where we ought to be.
You're also involved with National Louis University?
Yeah, very recently I joined the board of National Louis. National Louis has a 100-year history of educating teachers. And I made a decision not too long ago, a year or so ago, that I would devote the balance of my volunteer time on the earth to primary and secondary education. Because I think it's so very important to this country, really to the world, because America is a worldwide leader. And we have to be prepared. And so the president has coined the term, leave no child behind. I would love to help implement any program that would result in leaving no child behind. But obviously, as we know, our system of education in the United States, and particularly in Illinois, doesn't create the kind of level playing field that we need for that to have happened. So what I would like to do is to roll up my sleeves, get involved, and do what I can to make the situation better. And obviously, here again, one person isn't going to do it. It's a teamwork sort of thing. But recent actions, recent decisions here in the city of Chicago with respect to new approaches, smaller schools, charter schools, indicate that the community, the business leaders, the public servants are beginning to recognize that some change in the manner in which we've approached education is appropriate. And so I'm looking forward to the next 10 years of a solid involvement in that educational system. National Louis is a marvelous place. It has a history it goes back to Adams and Hull House and of course Jane Addams was a person who was quite instrumental in social programs. And so Ms. Baker, who really was instrumental in developing National Louis, started about the same time. They knew one another, and she went into early childhood education. And so National Louis has a fine reputation, and I'm hoping that we can continue and expand the role that National Louis has in the whole educational process. DePaul, too, has a fine school of education, and I'm involved in that school. And I'm hoping that DePaul will become, not that it isn't already, but will become a dominant player in educating teachers.
For a time, you were actively engaged at the state level under George Ryan in the State Board of Education.
Yes.
That, the way you described it to me, was a real eye-opener. You saw the complexity of the entire state, not just the city of Chicago and its many challenges and opportunities, but you saw the entire state. What would you like to see happen in the state of Illinois as you look down the road the next 10 to 15 years?
Well, that's a great question. I thought before I accepted the superintendent's role with the state of Illinois that I knew quite a little bit about schooling in Illinois. Well-read and discuss it often with friends. But it was an eye-opener. The complexity of the situation in Illinois simply isn't described in the daily press. the challenges that exist in urban areas versus rural areas, the challenges that exist for proper resources to be allocated in the southern part of the state isn't realized. And we have difficulty in encouraging high-quality teachers, particularly math, science, and special ed teachers to go to Southern Illinois to teach in some of those rural communities. And so there's a definite teacher shortage in Southern Illinois. Overall, the aggregate numbers are starting to look pretty good. There's still a shortage. There's still a shortage by discipline, but it's looking better. We're catching up. But in pockets of the state, we simply don't have the resources, both in terms of dollars and in terms of teachers, that is necessary, particularly in urban areas. And if you look at any urbanized area in the state of Illinois, you see problems with primary and secondary education, be it Rockford, East St. Louis, Peoria, be it Harvey, or even in the city of Chicago. Wherever you find clusters of poverty, there's a direct correlation to the quality of the education. And it turns out that we spend more money in the more wealthy communities per child on education because of property tax than we do in the more needy areas. And the reverse should be true, because I think we have to put more resources into the needy schools because of their special requirements. So one of the great problems is creating a level playing field. And that has to do with funding, and it has to do with what I believe should happen, and that's an income tax. But I'm practical also, and I know that that's not likely to happen in the near future. And so I think we have to take the resources we have. We've had, I think, two great governors back to back in terms of their feeling for education. Governor Ryan, with all of the adverse publicity that poor individual has had, nonetheless did a lot of good things. And one of the things he did, he was an education governor, and he provided more money for the schools and was very interested in the schools, and put human resources into that mix as well. So I applaud Governor Ryan for doing that. And it appears in his first year, Governor Blagojevich has a similar attitude towards schools. And so what we need is a person in the governor's mansion that understands the importance of funding. That's first and foremost, and I think we have that. And so we have a good staging in Illinois, but I agree also with Governor Blagojevich that some of the barnacles on the boat have to be scraped off, and we have to get a little more effective in the way in which we deliver the real dollars into the classroom. And so I applaud that. It's a matter of getting the programs together that will see that happens. But I think over the last 5 years, at least, we have carried the ball further, and we're in a better position now than we were 5 years ago. So hopefully that same kind of advancement can take place over the next 5 years.
When I talk to the state lawmakers in Springfield, those who are most active on the elementary and secondary education committees, tell me that what they would like to see is when the day comes that when the state school board comes to visit your campus, it's a good thing. You're glad to have them there, as opposed to, oh my gosh, it's the IRS or somebody showing up. It's kind of a sea change in attitudes that they're looking for.
Oh, I agree with that totally. I think that what has happened, if you take an overview, the legislature has created a lot of regulation. And the state board basically has created the requirements to fulfill those legislative enactments. And so it is a monitoring, it's an auditing kind of function that is carried out more than anything else. I think from my brief experience, what I would hope would happen is that the members of the state board would become better listeners. I think they have to be in their communities. They have to visit campuses. They have to understand situations that exist, and they have to be really good listeners. And that is important. And I'm hoping that whatever happens with the board and the powers of the governor's mansion, that there is that commitment to teamwork, commitment to working together for the benefit of the children in the classrooms. And so I think that everybody in Springfield, in a legislative or in an agency environment, have to be good listeners to what's happening in the local districts. There are almost 900 districts, and they're all very important, and we have to pay attention to their problems, their concerns.
We didn't touch upon your business career, and we need to do that. And we will come back full circle in a moment. You took a very small firm, relatively speaking, in terms of the major accounting firms in the city of Chicago, and worked with it over a good number of years, and made it one of the major players not only in Chicago but nationally. Would you like to go over a little bit of the background on that? A lot of good things happened there, Coopers, in my opinion.
Well, yes, we had a good run. And again, I had a great team. And like with most challenges that are significant, one person can make a difference, but one person can't do it all. And so we went from the 10th largest CPA firm in Chicago to the 2nd largest CPA firm in Chicago. And we probably were the fastest growing of any of the organizations in personal service delivery here in the city. And that comes from I guess, my leadership in allowing people who had the talent to do what they did best. And I did, I guess, select some folks that were really good at what they did, and we had a great team. And the team worked very effectively together. And so our net result was a lot of growth, and I think a lot of quality. We were, I think, dedicated to one thing more than anything else, and that was quality of service. So we did a lot of training. We did a lot of role modeling in terms of client services, in terms of making sure that our clients were well cared for. And so we very rarely lost a client, very rarely. And we gained a lot of clients. And so it was a good run.
You told me the other day that one of the things that came out of that for you was your learning to love helping people learn new things about the business and themselves.
Yeah. I served as a managing partner of our Midwest region at that time, and it was 20 offices or 25 offices. I forget the exact number, but they were all in the Midwest, and in a partnership that relies on paying their partners in cash on a cash basis. You pay pretty close attention to the profits on a monthly basis. So I had that job for 17 years, and if you multiply that times 12, times the 25 offices, literally thousands of times I went through closings of the books. And I can't remember a single solitary instance that was of any import in all of those what were then important activities. What I do remember very clearly is the times that I was able to assist somebody in enhancing their life, assist somebody in terms of a direction they were taking, or in terms of the things that they were then doing that created a better life for them. And not necessarily materialistic, but a better life in terms of their understanding of themselves and where they were going. And so I made it a practice, even as I left that job and retired and went into some government service, I always took the people around me and encouraged them to go back to school. And so I think I'm responsible for any number of degrees with just the people that reported to me. So it was always an objective of mine to enhance the position and the stature of the people that I had some influence over. And those are the things that I remember. In fact, the enjoyment of later years of life include for me occasional messages, either emails now or telephone calls or a little note Ernie, thank you very much kind of stuff, because they remember that it was something that we had done together early in their careers that allowed them to advance to whatever they are today. So it's part of the reward, I guess, of having that happen. But helping other people is much more important than any business gain. And I think if you look at successful business people, that there's a high correlation between their success and the people around them that they help to new heights in their careers.
I hear that often as I talk to folks in a similar situation like yours. You took early retirement to go into government service. You worked, you worked with Governor Edgar on the Public Health Care Task Force, Healthcare Reform Task Force. You served as city clerk, later director of revenue in the city of Chicago. Let's talk about some of those experiences.
Well, when Governor Edgar asked me to chair the Illinois Healthcare Reform Task Force, I responded to Governor that I didn't know very much about healthcare. I mean, I was in public accounting, and we had hospital clients. We had long-term care facility clients, and so I knew a little bit, but I wasn't involved with those audits. And so I was maybe a little better informed than the man on the street, but not very expert. And so when the governor asked me to do this, I questioned him in the sense that, maybe you ought to have somebody that really knows the landscape here. And he said, no, there's enough experts out there. What I need is somebody to organize the experts. And so we had 55 people from throughout the state of Illinois that represented all facets of the healthcare industry. And it was a very, very exciting year. It was a pro bono engagement. I officed with public aid. They had space for me there, and I had a couple of people that reported to me, administrative people. And we did, I think, a fine job.
What year was that?
That must have been 92, 93, in that range. Yeah.
And that was at a time when we saw incredible pressures on the state budget because of the explosion of Medicaid spending in the state.
Yes, absolutely.
We were not able to always meet our obligations on that. Hospitals were being paid late and everything.
Well, particularly long-term care facilities were delayed 9 months, sometimes a year in payments, and it was very bad. But it was, again, an eye-opener because there is inequality in our state because of the demographics. And so in southern Illinois, there are cases where you can't get a health care provider, either a doctor or nurse, within 100 miles of certain areas of population, or where you've got to travel across bridges that aren't always open. And it's an incredible story about the inequities. As a matter of fact, I think at that time, and I'm not familiar with the data today, but at that time, I believe the federal government declared that 60% of the counties in Illinois were underserved by healthcare professionals, that there was a critical need for more delivery personnel in 60% of our counties. Most all of those were in southern Illinois. So it was an exciting year. We were a creature of the legislature. They created the task force. We reported back to the governor our findings. I think they were well received. Some changes were made at that time. But as we all know, continued review, continued consideration of healthcare delivery in the entire country is important. We have simply too many people that aren't covered today. And if a person has a healthcare problem without coverage, it's a very, very sad situation, very sad. And so we have to go to universal coverage somehow, some way in this country. We have to take care of every one of our citizens. The problem is how to fund it, how to pay for it. But hopefully we'll get closer to that. Maybe not in my lifetime, but clearly it's a need in this country that we do that. But that was a very exciting period of time. And then there was a little problem in Chicago. Sometimes some of our elected officials want to get into trouble, and so the city clerk of the city of Chicago was convicted in a federal case, and he went to prison. And so the mayor wanted to put somebody into that role that had a reputation for being clean cut, and I guess coming out of a profession where ethics is a very important part of the whole scene. He looked to me. I had known the mayor, but rather casually. I didn't count him as a friend, as a bosom buddy, certainly. But he knew of me, and he has a good memory for names. So when he saw me, he said, "Hi, Ernie." But that was kind of the extent of it. But he knew about me, and so he asked if I would take on that role, which I gladly did. And I think we did a good job. I think we did a very good job. We reduced the size of the budget dramatically, and because of the work that I did in the clerk's role, when Jim Lasky then ran for the office and was elected clerk, because I'm not a politician and I wasn't going to run, and that was the understanding that the mayor and I had initially, that I would not run for the next term. Then he asked me if I wouldn't do the revenue department for a little bit of time, and I did that for a couple of 3 years. And again, it was very exciting, and I think we did good work. I think that the mayor has been very wise in asking individuals in the business community to come into government in selected situations where there's a need for a specific talent to exercise that within government. I think that's worked out well for the city of Chicago, and hopefully he'll continue to do that.
What are some of the things you think you were able to accomplish in those roles with the budget office and the clerk's office?
Well, let me take the clerk's office because it came first. When you're in a consumer business, as I was, the first and foremost consideration after your people are your clients. You have to go out and understand your clients and understand what their needs are and what their thoughts are in order to serve them better. So one of the roles of the city clerk is to serve city council. I went to every council meeting. I sat right below the mayor in the chamber. All of my people were in council to handle the administrative affairs of the council. And we paid all of the salaries of the individuals connected with aldermanic offices. We handled all of the fringe benefits. So we had a lot of contact with aldermen, the 50 aldermen in Chicago. So what I did first in the job is I went to each alderman individually, asked for a meeting, and sat down and said, "What would you like to see? What are your needs? How can I help you best?" And from that, we developed a whole series of stuff, like the clerk is the historian for the city of Chicago. We keep all of the past records, usually embodied in the minutes of the meetings. They're the journals that are there. And so many times the alderman will say, "Well, if I want to find out what happened in 1977, I need to get a contact." That'll stop momentarily.
Let's wait for just a moment.
Okay, I'm going to get up.
You're still connected here.
Oh, sorry about that. I've got to get a handkerchief. That is a 100-year anniversary present from Cooperson Librand. They sent that to retired people on the occasion of our 100th anniversary. Now it stops. It does that every hour, so if we don't finish within the next hour.
Oops.
Oh, sorry about that.
So that
I'm glad for the break anyway.
There we go. Situate again. All right.
Well, with that approach, I learned a great deal about what the aldermen saw as the role of the city clerk. Of course, I compared that with what the regulations required that I do, and was in a much better position to serve properly in that area. We also handled the sale of the city sticker in the city of Chicago and a number of other smaller roles. But we increased the sales of the sticker through a number of different methodologies, tracking down people who didn't buy the sticker regularly. So we increased the sales, and that was $100 million of revenue, so it was quite important. So I think we served the council better. We made a number of administrative efficiencies. I would just say, as I recall, when I assumed the role, we had 135 people. When I left the job, we had 99. We cut the budget in spite of significant paper increases by 10% in 2 years, cut the budget. Obviously, we reduced employment by over 30. The clerk's office produces a lot of paper because of all of the regulations that have to be copied and all of the minutes that have to be written. As a matter of fact, if you stacked up the paper against Sears Tower, you'd have 3 or 4 times Sears Tower annually of paper that's produced. And by the time I left, it was down to a third of one Sears Tower. So we cut the paper production by 90%. Now, we did it through a number of different vehicles, but and time won't permit to detail all of those. But believe me, we did a massive job in terms of reorganizing the whole effort. So we were able to do quite a significant job in a 2-year period. Revenue Department collect $2.5 billion a year in any number of different programs. Handle all of the tax returns, handle all of the auditing, handle all of the ticket writing, collection of meters. So it's a big job. Almost 2,000 people report to the Director of Revenue. And basically, I concentrated in that area in selecting a team. I put together 10 people who were my leadership team, and they handled various segments of the operations. Outstanding people, each of them. And so I found an opportunity at the mid-level of government to find high-quality people. And again, I encouraged them to receive additional education in areas where I thought education would benefit them in terms of their current job. And so we had a good run. We improved revenues in the 2 or 3 years that I was there. The net was $100 million. So we had a lot of programs. Again, the parking tickets were one of the areas where there's a lot of money involved. And we didn't do too good a job at that time in collection. And we started the technology revolution that had to occur for us to track tickets better. So today, I think you find that people don't get away with not paying. If they don't pay, they get booted, and other bad things happen to them. So people who get parking tickets in Chicago now have to pay. So I think that started 10, 12 years ago under my leadership, and I'm pretty pleased with that. So basically, what we did is in both positions, we identified people who had the talent to get things done at a middle management level. And I'm really proud of all of the people that I had at that level because they have gone on to do different things. One is now running all of the finances for Chicago Public School System. And just one example of where people have gone since they left the Revenue Department. But again, it's people who make the difference. I had a fine leadership team, and we did good work.
You've also spent a good amount of your time and talents working on behalf of charitable organizations in the Chicagoland area,
Yeah.
United Way. How much of an involvement was that for you? What kind of time commitment was that, and the reward that came from that?
Well, I was chairman of the United Way here in Chicago. I've been involved with the United Way for probably 15 or more years in one capacity or another, but during those 3 years, the time commitment was significant. I probably spent 1,000 hours a year, 1,200 hours a year, directly with United Way programs. I believe then, I believe today, that the United Way is a real necessity in our community. United Way has fallen on hard times, but I think under the current leadership are doing a great job, and they're coming back fine. And I think it's once again going to be a very well-recognized organization in the city of Chicago. But during those 3 years, we had a lot of internal strife. We had 3 organizations, all separately constituted with separate boards, and it was very difficult to get decisions made because all 3 of the boards had to agree, and it was a difficult situation. And I think it's fair to say that I was the pivotal person, along with the chairman of the suburban group that began the unification process. And what we did during those 3 years is we converted the 3 organizations to 2. Now, very recently, it's taken 10 years, but very recently they've gone to 1 organization. So the process that we started during the time that I was chairman, I think has eventually resulted in a unification that is going to set a platform that will allow the United Way to grow again significantly in Chicago.
Why is United Way such an important organization? Of course, we have it in Carbondale and all the areas in between. What does it allow the different organizations and community service organizations and the like that it helps fund? How does it bring it all together and make it happen?
Well, I probably could chat about that for a considerable amount of time, but the basic things that the United Way brings to the table is a clear recognition of the needs of a community. So when you have an agency who's delivering services in a community, like Catholic Charities, when they have the imprimatur of the United Way, everybody recognizes that the program that the United Way is sponsoring has been looked at very carefully, and that not only is it functioning as intended and properly, but that it's what the community needs. So the United Way creates a prioritization of need so that an individual like myself or yourself who wants to do something in a community but doesn't know what to do gives their money to the United Way, who then distributes it according to the needs assessment. So the 2 things that the United Way does is raise the money effectively at a low cost and distribute it to agencies where the neediest of individuals in the community will receive that benefit. So those are the 2 things that the United Way does. And it allows people that don't want to study. We support 400 agencies here in Chicago and the suburban areas. And one individual really can't study 400 agencies or the various areas. And we market our services in 3 separate areas: youth, children, and adults. And so we understand those areas of need very well, and we allocate funds to agencies that perform programs, specific programs in those areas. And so it's really an effective way of fundraising for the best of purposes. And that's what the United Way does. And I'm sure they do it in Carbondale just as well as we do it in Chicago.
We even have a United Appeal that goes through the that's something like 6,000 employees. You count faculty and
Sure.
staff and everything. So there's
A campaign.
exactly
Yes.
every year. Is there anything I haven't talked to you about that you want to make sure that we get on the record?
Well, I've been a White Sox fan for better than 60 years, and I'm hoping that sometime in my lifetime they'll win a World Series. Maybe I should settle for their getting into a World Series. You know, Jack, I think things change in a lifetime, and your perspective changes, and things that were at one time very important, like sports, were very important. And I would, as a youngster, track all of the statistics and know the batting averages and the ERAs and of the pitchers and all of that kind of stuff. But I don't have that need anymore, or that feeling. So different things are important to me. It's important to me that I pay attention to needy people, that I pay attention to opportunity for others. I'm a very patriotic guy. I think America is a fine place to live and to be. And I think sometimes we criticize ourselves, particularly in the political process. When we have political campaigns going, it sometimes gets very negative and it rubs off on America. But America is a very fine place. There isn't a country in the world. I don't think there's a person anywhere in the world that wouldn't want to be a citizen of the United States of America. And so, first and foremost, I think we've got to, as I said earlier, give back. And so that's what we're all about. You know, my wife passed away recently. Today is the 35th day. And when I got the award, she wasn't able to be there. She was in a hospital then and died shortly thereafter. So, you know, I want to rededicate myself, because Joan was such a beautiful person, to do something in her honor as well.
Do you have any ideas at this point about the next step, the next cause? Or?
Well, I can tell you, although I don't know what the governor will do, I have submitted my name in case he selects members of the State Board of Education. I've submitted my name. I volunteered. It's not an easy job. It's relatively low paying. I think they get $50 a meeting for a 2-day meeting. And I think it's probably a half-time job, truth be known, by the time you get done with all of the studies. So it's not a job that one would seek for any kind of financial reward. But I hope that as the governor looks at opportunities to enhance the board, that he might consider me for that role. And if he does, I'll work as hard as I possibly can. I haven't found the vehicle yet, but I would like to start something that would create a grassroots interest in changing the funding for schools in Illinois. That's a long-term process. It will require 10 years probably, but I think it has to start, and now is probably a good time to start it. So I'll be doing those things.
Very good. Thank you very much.
Jack, my pleasure.
My pleasure, too.
Pleasure, thank you.